Welcome once again to Planet Normal, the Telegraph podcast with Alison Pearson
Hello.
and me, Liam Halligan. Another U-turn co-pilot from Keir Starmer's Labour government this week. The Prime Minister's abandoned plans to delay local elections across 30 English councils, 21 of them currently controlled by Labour, but which in some cases the party looks likely to lose. Faced with a legal challenge from Reform UK, the government's caved, with ministers now trying to claim that their legal advice has changed, advice they don't seem too keen to publish. Starmer's U-turns are fast becoming the stuff of legend. His government's changed its mind on a host of issues, from including cuts to winter fuel payments, restrictions on some disability benefits, and hikes in inheritance tax for farmers. I'm a pragmatist, a common sense merchant, says Starmer in his defence. The government tried to cancel democracy, remarked Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. They've been defeated. Reform fancies its chances in several of the council seats that will now be contested on the 7th of May, including Basildon, Cannock Chase, Harlow, West Sussex, and Thurrock. And the party made further announcements this week, unveiling Robert Jenrick as Reform Shadow Chancellor, Richard Tice as Shadow Business Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister, Zia Yusuf as Shadow Home Secretary, and Suella Braverman as Shadow Education Secretary. There's lots going on beyond the UK too, Alison. I'm just back from the Gulf, and the US and Iran are, of course, locked in negotiations, with President Donald Trump also trying to broker a deal between Russia and Ukraine. Meanwhile, we've both read Linus Shriver's new novel, even though it's not yet been published, and we're preparing for our Planet Normal event next week on Tuesday, the 24th of February, less than a week to go, and tickets are selling fast.
They certainly are, and it's a blistering, very funny novel, isn't it, Liam? It's just one of her top ones, I think.
So we get to read it because we get, as journalists, we get review copies. That's how reviewers read novels before they're published. And I must say, I read it in two sittings, two big gulps. It doesn't pull its punches. It deals extremely deftly, as she often does, with a big issue of our day. And the big issue of the day that she's dealing with in this context in the US is immigration, particularly in New York, in the borough of Brooklyn. A family takes in a single female, quotes, asylum seeker. There's an awful lot of progressive thinking going on. The mother of the household is very keen that this happens. Her kids are varying degrees of supportive. And in the end, the thing goes horribly wrong. And it really is an incredible read. It's an incredible story. It's full of twists. And I was completely absorbed by it, which is always the sign of a great novel. And of course, Lionel's going to be joined at our Planet Normal event, which is Tuesday, the 24th of February at the Emmanuel Centre in Westminster, of course, by yourself and me and Suella Braverman.
I'm invited, am I?
You are. You just made it in, just under the wire. Other co-pilots weren't available that night, so
Well, it's quite a lot of people have said, "Oh, you did very well to invite Suella because of the Reform defection and her being unveiled." As you just said, Liam, not just Shadow Education Secretary, but for women and equalities. I did love the fact that in typical Suella fashion, within seconds of announcing her potential new title in government, she said she'd be scrapping the Equalities Ministry on day one, thus doing herself out of a job. But we didn't know. We didn't know, did we? We had no proof that she was going to defect, but it will make next Tuesday's night's discussion even more interesting. And there are some tickets left, and please do come, because I think it's going to be an absolutely cracking evening. And God knows we could all do with some entertainment and distraction from the 17th U-turn, or is it? We've lost count, haven't we?
and we have lost count. These are tough times, but what we try and do with Planet Normal always, not least in our live events, is we tackle difficult issues. We talk about them. We agree. We disagree. We respect each other. But we always have a laugh along the way, because I think unless you can have a laugh along the way, well, I think having a laugh, very little great was ever achieved in the world without laughter. You need some laughter. I don't know who said it, but I just did. So if it isn't a sort of truism, it should be, I reckon. Sorry to make it up on the fly, but so often in life you need to look on the light side, the bright side. You need to have some kind of gallows humor sometimes. The UK is in a difficult situation. Our fiscal situation is very precarious. We are spending a huge amount of money borrowing, and let's go straight in. I just watched, before we recorded this on Wednesday late afternoon, I watched Robert Jenrick's press conference in the city this morning, and he's Reform's Shadow Chancellor, and he went in on borrowing costs, and that was exactly right. And I quite liked a lot of the things that he said. Actually, the party is trying hard not to be tarred with the brush of fiscal irresponsibility.
Mm.
Kemi Badenoch's Conservatives are going big on standing up for financial reality. We are the grown-ups in the room. We have costed all these cuts we're going to make to public spending, or slowdowns in the rate of increase of public spending. Farage, last year, when he saw the fiscal situation deteriorating, when he saw Rachel Reeves keep missing her fiscal rules, when growth turned out to be slower than we thought it would be, and we've had a growth number just last week as well that turned out to be pretty slow, just 0.1% growth in the fourth quarter of the year, 1.3% for the year as a whole. Farage tracked back, and he said, we want to do these tax cuts. Ideologically, we're a tax cutting party. We want the state to be smaller, to do less, but do it better. But we can't do these tax cuts when the public finances are so weak. And Jenrick repeated that on Wednesday in his sort of inaugural press conference as Reform Shadow Chancellor. He repeated the idea that he's promoting, that Reform are going to actually rein in spending before you get in tax cuts. He very pointedly attacked Liz Truss, not entirely fairly, I thought, but politics is a contact sport, saying that her mini budget made a classic error that Reform didn't want to make. So Reform are now trying to position themselves as the party of fiscal prudence. And I do think that, believe it or not, despite what people often say to pollsters, despite what a lot of journalists say, I do think there is now a marketplace for sort of, fiscal prudence, for some kind of controls on public spending, for managing the economy in a responsible way. And it's clear that Reform are now taking the fight to the Tories. And I thought Jenrick, he was really enjoying himself. There was one point when a journalist chanced their arm, saying, but how are you going to get on with Nigel Farage? He's obviously he's been running a one-man band for years. A lot of smart people have worked with him, and they've ended up out on the street, frankly, chucked out of the party and so on, thinking of Rupert Lowe and others. And Jenrick said, straight down the barrel of the camera, without missing a beat, well, it's nice to be in a party with a respected and decisive leader, right? So that was pretty gloves off, I thought. There's going to be no love lost between Reform and the Tories.
Well, I think wasn't Prudence Gordon Brown's squeeze? Do you remember that?
Prudence with a purpose.
Prudence. Yeah, a couple of things. I think you're right. I think this has been seen as a Reform weakness. I've seen quite a lot of coverage on sort of Tory type websites where they've said, oh yes, but they've got socialist economic policies. So I think that's closing down that particular line of argument. I was a bit surprised to see Jenrick ruling out getting rid of the uncoupling from the OBR and being slightly nice about the Bank of England. Now that may tap into what you're saying, Liam, but I can remember Nigel Farage being pretty critical about the sort of the OBR, which even co-pilot Halligan, the second most distinguished economist on our podcast, has said in the past haven't always had a great track record of being helpful or reliable, have they? So why are they still sticking with those? Is that to look responsible as well?
A lot of people at the top of Reform, what they're obviously they want to position themselves as fiscally prudent, but they don't want to box themselves in. Kemi, for a long time, has been trying to put a wedge between the likes of Tice, from the kind of libertarian wing of the party, the sort of properly Thatcherite wing of the party, and Farage, who is a more of an instinctive campaigner. I'm not saying that he doesn't agree with Tice economically, or Jenrick for that matter, but Farage is as a seasoned campaigner. He knows what goes down well in the Red Wall, where Reform have to win lots of seats if they're going to form the next government, or even lead the next government, ruling in some kind of coalition. And we're going to chop a load of government spending. Doesn't always go down well in those constituencies. So there is a bit of a tension there. But I think what a lot of people are worried about now is, we've seen really febrile response to the sort of political madness at the top of the Labour Party in recent weeks. 10-year, 30-year bond yields have been very jumpy. A sense that Britain is now a clear outlier across the G7 in terms of what we're paying for our national debt, the yields that the big global investors who lend government serious money, they're demanding to lend to the British government, have been extremely toppy, and there's no sign they're coming down sharp anytime soon. And I think a lot of people at the top of the Reform are worried, with bond markets so febrile, that they come in and the bond markets instantly go no. There's instant kind of meltdown, which of course would massively undermine their
Like with the trust.
yeah, yeah, which will massively undermine their kind of, well, their consent to rule, frankly, their authority. And so I know for a fact that Reform are going to be spending a lot of time talking to people in financial markets. They're going to be spending a lot of time with this interface between politics and high finance, because this isn't about bankers' bonuses or city regulation, though Jenrick did rightly mention that as well. The City of London is on its knees. We haven't had many listings. Not many companies have floated or initiated their first share sales, as we say in finance. In London, London's not even in the top 20 listing destinations for 2025. And when a company lists, there's a huge amount of additional work: lawyers, accountants, PR people, all kinds of stuff going on in perpetuity. A tax stream of tax revenue from companies listed in the UK. We're losing out on listings, right? But what Reform are really worried about is that the bond markets aren't going to like the cut of their jib. So it's absolutely essential that Reform now properly take on the Tories under that heading of fiscal responsibility, and don't make any rash promises about the public finances.
I thought it was a very strong week for them. Obviously, they're rather a bit cheeky calling them the shadow cabinet,
Yeah,
because strictly speaking, only Her Majesty's opposition can form the shadow cabinet. So that was a bit
right.
naughty, putting the names up on the on the placards. But they did have, I mean, clearly there've been various voices, not least the Telegraph's own Campaign for Democracy, which has been rightly pushing back at this dreadfully, authoritarian government, Liam. I mean, every week now seems to bring some fresh horror, whether it's restricting trial by jury. But this absolute cheek of them, the brass neck, trying to cancel, as you said at the top, 30 elections, and a large percentage of them where Labour looks set to get a damn good kicking from Reform. So it's like, oh, we won't hold those. Starmer today, Wednesday, is trying to claim, oh, the pressure all came from the councils, but they're real weasels. So Reform was tomorrow. I mean, this will be today when everyone's listening to this, Planet Normal listeners. Thursday, they prompted a judicial review in the High Court, and that really, the government looked, didn't it, as if it was going to lose that. So they pulled out another U-turn 15, 16 or 17, quite possibly. So that was very good for Farage. Can position himself as the champion of democracy. Not only that, but a lot of voters who were going to be 4.6 million people were going to be denied votes. They're going to be even more inspired, let's say, aren't they, to get down to the polling booth this time to show these
Yeah.
people what they feel. And we've spoken a lot on Planet Normal about this, that May the 7th, I think, potential bloodbath now, specifically for Starmer. You mentioned some of the councils, Liam, at the top, but also it's these the bigger county councils, Norfolk and Suffolk,
Yeah.
which could again easily go to reform. Now,
Unbelievable. I mean, they are proper true blue Tory forever
proper true
territory.
blue,
I
but it
mean,
was very
really
funny
incredible.
because, as you say, Nigel being pretty feisty when someone taunted him at the press conference announcing Zia Yusuf as the Shadow Home, as you say, Richard, Deputy Prime Minister and Business, Suella Education, and Jenrick indeed as Chancellor. And someone said, "Oh, the Tories described him as a tribute act," and Nigel said, "Yeah, you come to the press conference on May the 8th." And they will not be a national party geographically. And as you say, he is many things, but he is a pretty shrewd analyst of the way things are going. So but I think we should talk a bit about, I've got a lot of time for Zia Youssef. Uh, I think he's probably the only politician I've met who would stop the boats. If he can't stop them theoretically, he'll get down there with his chainsaw. I mean, that man is a Terminator. He is the most. We can talk about his arrogance and his can be occasionally charmless, shall we say, but phenomenally determined and driven. Something that's happened, Liam, which we've talked a bit about, something that slightly disturbed me. So we saw the launch this week of Rupert Lowe's they're all called the same, aren't they?
Restore.
Claim, Restore Britain. Now, I've got some time for Rupert Lowe. He has presided over, funded and presided over a national rape inquiry, which concluded last week. He's absolutely championed, along with Sammy Woodhouse, that incredibly urgent national scandal, which most people are keen to bury. So he's he's a serious figure. But what's coming through now is, just as Reform was formed to keep the Tories honest because they weren't right wing enough. Now we've got Restore Britain formed because people are accusing Reform of being a bit slack and not radical enough. And something that's bothered me has been picking up this idea that, oh, he's appointed a Muslim, which is Zia Youssef, to Home Secretary. So obviously he can't be relied upon to deport all illegal migrants. I literally swear to you, if that man is Home Secretary, you would not want to be an illegal migrant, right?
Mm.
Absolutely. He's
That goes too far for me. Yeah, that goes too far for me, and I think for you as well, to preclude somebody from holding a great office of state because of their religion. I mean, I think of anyone on the Labour front bench that would fill me most with confidence or leave me least worried, it's Shabana Mahmood, and I think you'd feel the same way, right?
Well, I do, and also I think
Yeah.
a person in Labour that I think you and I have since the loss of the great Frank Field, one of the people we most rate is Maurice Glasman, Lord
Sure.
Glasman, and who does Maurice rate is Shabana
Big
Mahmood,
time.
because he
Big
said if
time.
anyone's gonna do something
Mm.
about this dreadful,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
Maurice has said the immigration is appalling, out of
And
control.
a proud Jewish man to boot.
A proud Jewish man.
And
So I so we're
deeply
getting
proud of his Jewish roots, and he doesn't have a problem with a Muslim Home Secretary, and I don't think Rupert Lowe should.
But we're getting this, I don't even like the word, but ethno-nationalism
Yeah.
creeping in, are you English enough to hold these positions? Well,
Mm.
uh, my own experience, and certainly it's borne out with Suella, often the children of immigrants or the grandchildren of immigrants are among our most ferociously
Yeah.
patriotic people, because they are, like Suella will always say, and Zia Yusuf has said, his parents, in fact, their parents, quite interesting, came over in a similar, I think Suella's mum came over at 18 as a nurse, and
Mm.
Zia's mum's a nurse or a care home worker. and both sets of parents worked in the NHS, and the word they use is gratitude. And
Yeah.
Zia spoke in his speech at the launch of his mother telling him British people were kind, and he
Yeah.
said, I don't want that kindness to be taken advantage of. So it may be that immigrant stock can be more aware of some of the things that we should all hold dear, and which some of us are perhaps not as good at standing up for. It's just given me a bad feeling. A lot of people I agree with on most political points. I've thought, I've bet this guy. I I can see why some people are put off, but I absolutely think that's the one person in British political life who, if he can't deport all illegal migrants, he will die trying. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm telling you that now. So if there is, we don't know yet. Obviously, there's 3 years to go. But if he is the Home Secretary, let's just watch what he does, and then let's have them say, "Oh, he's an Islamist," and we'll go soft on Islam. I don't think so.
I agree with you very much about the gratitude of immigrants. I mean, that's been the story of my life in many ways, my family's life, and you don't need to be a genius at history to realize there's lots of reasons why Irish people may not like British people going back in the midst of
No,
time. But
yeah,
certainly my generation, my dad's generation, certainly my late father himself, huge gratitude towards the UK. It doesn't mean you're a pushover, it doesn't mean you're some kind of patsy
mm,
crawler, but you just, this is the place that allowed us to, you know, amass some property and go to work, get paid, etc., etc. So I totally agree with you that. And just before we move on, Alison, I would say that Rupert Lowe is actually doing Nigel Farage a favour and will continue to do Nigel Farage and
do
Reform a
you?
favour,
Why?
because Rupert Lowe and co will stake out ground on certain positions, and Elon Musk will back them loudly, and then Nigel can rebuff those positions and come across as what he is, somebody who is not particularly extreme, who is not racist, who's not, you know, a rabble rouser, race baiter. He isn't any of those things. And anyone that knows him or has even been reading his speeches over many years, must come to that conclusion unless they're being deliberately out to assassinate his character. And if Rupert Lowe keeps saying things about who he's going to deport and who he's not, and Nigel Farage says, no, that's too extreme. Reform won't do that. Okay, Reform might lose a few votes off the end, but by being seen to rebuff those positions publicly, being seen to cause discontent among certain people who used to be in Reform and now aren't, that will actually help Nigel and Richard and Suella and Zia to draw in people from the centre and the centre right who are still feeling queasy about Reform. It's the same reason why Nigel, knocks down Tommy Robinson every time his name comes up in conversation, because he can, that allows him to seem, relatively moderate compared to some other people that are standing for election. And
They
as
are.
the Overton window shifts right, that's a really useful thing for Nigel to be able to draw on, in my view.
I But I want right? I I really want I want a radical centre-right government. So I'm not talking about thinking, "Let's water it all down." Their reforms promise is they are gonna deport they would deport in their first term 600,000 illegal migrants. That is not a skim milk promise, Liam.
No,
If
no,
if that if anything like that could be attempted, and imagine the screaming of the bien pensant when they try to do
going to
that.
be nasty. Mm.
But it will be, and Zia has said to me, it will be ugly. But they are, so let's not paint them as being, as some people who are restore Rupert Lowe supporters, let's not say that Reform are some absolutely livid people. In fact, I think the reality, what a lot of these restores Lowe supporters don't really get, is winning an election is about bringing people with you, which is what
Exactly.
you've just described.
Exactly.
So will they be really radical and powerful in government given the chance? And we heard Suella, didn't we, saying we're rooting out DEI from schools, right? Identity politics is ruining our country. It's not causing unity. It's causing really ugly division, no child being taught that they're in the wrong body. So there are a lot of very radical policies. And my attitude is I'd rather have a good dollop of what I want. And, you can't have everything. It's not perfect. But if you have these people, what they call in the purity spiral, which is, if we don't have everybody, going the full right wing, then they're not to be trusted. That's not my view. I've always said to you, I think reform's share of the vote is strong, but is underestimated. And I think we are going to see. First we'll see in the Gorton and Denton by-election on the 29th. Be interesting to see how well Matt Goodwin does there. But on May the 7th, I think on May the 8th, everything will have changed. The national picture will have changed. There will be no place to hide for Labour or the Conservatives. It will be there really clearly how many people are prepared to vote for you. And I also think as well that Reform is very aware of the threat from Islamist extremists as well. But it's interesting. Splintering on the right, it just seems to me sad. I wish Ben Habib was still in Reform myself, and I'm sure lots of people do. This week, Liam, we have a special guest who has a desperately sad but important story to tell. Siobhan White's daughter Rhiannon was working in an asylum hotel in October 2024 when she was savagely murdered on her way to the local train station by an illegal migrant, Deng Majek. The Sudanese Majek had been rejected for asylum in Germany and Italy before arriving in the UK by small boat just 11 weeks before he launched the frenzied, motiveless attack on the 27-year-old mother of a 5-year-old boy. Rhiannon was stabbed 23 times with a screwdriver by a man who should never have been in our country. She was just one of a number of British women and girls who have been raped or murdered by illegal migrants, either awaiting asylum decisions or those already granted asylum. Following the murder, Majek was captured on CCTV, unbelievably dancing and laughing. In January just gone, he was sentenced to 29 years in prison. Addressing him in court, Siobhan White said, "I hope you never see the outside world again. Let me see you dancing now." Siobhan told me that her hatred for the killer is strong, but her love for her daughter is stronger. Siobhan White has 5 adult children, and she had an unusually close relationship with Rhiannon, the second youngest, who lived with her. Since her daughter's killer was jailed, Siobhan has started to campaign on behalf of mothers who are murdered and the little children that they leave behind. I began by asking Siobhan why she thought there was no great national outcry about Rhiannon. Why does she think her daughter's horrific murder by an asylum seeker was downplayed? Welcome to Planet Normal, Siobhan.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry that we have to, we're talking today about the murder of your wonderful daughter, Rhiannon. I know you don't like to hear his name, so we're just going to use it this one time, just so listeners know. This Sudanese illegal migrant, asylum seeker, Deng Majek, was jailed in January for 29 years for a frenzied attack on Rhiannon, your daughter, and a 27-year-old mother of a then 5-year-old boy, your grandson. He stabbed Rhiannon 23 times with a screwdriver as she walked to a train station that was just very near the asylum hotel where she was working in hospitality. Now, Siobhan, I feel all sorts of things and I'd rather be there giving you a hug, to be quite honest with you. You've been incredibly brave speaking out to honour the memory of your daughter. It does seem to me there's lots to talk about. It seems to me that it's such a horrific case with lots of implications for the safety of women and girls in our country. I would say a clear case of a man who should never have been allowed in Britain, taking your daughter's life. And yet there has not been this great national outcry. Rhiannon White's name is not a household name, which I think it should be. Siobhan, do you think Rhiannon's murder was downplayed and hasn't got the attention it deserves? And do you have any idea why that might be?
I think it was. I think it has been downplayed. But again, the police never stopped us talking about it. I chose not to talk about it because obviously I wanted justice. But as for the downplay, yeah, I think with Rhiannon's case and sadly other women's cases, I think they're just pushed aside, and what they do is they bring in irrelevant news that covers it all.
And do you think that's because it's embarrassing to draw attention to the fact that this asylum seeker, quote unquote, we might call him something else, that this system, since Starmer became Prime Minister, 67,000 mainly undocumented young males have come ashore in Kent. That's pretty embarrassing for the government. Do you think there's any element in which Rhiannon's horrible murder was,
Preventable. Yeah, I think it was. And it's like I've said, and I'll continue to say, if he had, I know it was the government before him, but if he actually cared about his own country, Britain, he would have abolished everything that the other government have said prior to him and done something about this. But they're not. They're just allowing it all the time. But he doesn't even acknowledge it.
But do you think that Rhiannon's murder, and we know we'll talk about that a bit more, but every week now there seems to be some case, doesn't there, of a girl being raped, or that's happening the whole time, that because it's embarrassing to the government. I mean, we had Starmer last week apologizing to the female victims of Jeffrey Epstein, who obviously carried out his crimes in the United States, but nothing for Rhiannon. How does that make you feel?
Angry. But the thing is, it's not just Rhiannon's name. It's sadly Katie, Stephanie, Lily, etc. Even Wayne. What he does is he doesn't face it head on. He sits back, but then you haven't got any member of this government reaching out saying, right, we'll stop this now. Enough is enough. But again, as you just said, they bring in Epstein, they bring in Mandelson. Well, yes, a lot of girls were abused, sexually abused. In America, what he should be saying is, right, let's do one thing at a time. Firstly, the immigration side of it, because there's more immigrants than what there is people that Epstein abused. And I don't mean that in a horrible way, but he needs to take note. He needs to sit up and realise what's going on.
So this creature, I don't know how you describe him, a really malevolent monster. We'll talk about some of that in a minute. He'd travelled from South Sudan, hadn't he? I know you know a lot about his case now, and he'd actually applied for asylum in Germany and been turned down, hadn't he?
And Italy. Yeah. He went from South Sudan to North Sudan because he was scared for his own life, apparently. Fled to Libya, went from Libya to Germany, denied asylum, got arrested in Germany, may I add. Went to Italy, denied asylum, went to France, came to the UK, yeah.
That should mean if he's denied asylum, the idea he
The
pitches
reason why that, yeah.
Yeah. So he could, in an ideal world, you would hope he would land on our shore and he would be detained and
You would
deported,
think
right?
so. I mean, you get the spiel of, we can't send him back as a war-torn country. Well, really, you need to look at Britain because we are now going into a war-torn country.
Yeah.
The day he arrived, was the day Axel Rudicabana got arrested.
The government's got this one in, one out scheme to return migrants to France, but so far we're taking more than we're sending back. So that's ridiculous. He also lied about his age, didn't he? He was
Yeah.
pretending to be younger. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, he said he was 18, 19 when he committed the crime. None of it made sense. But they've got the generic birth date of the 1st of the 1st.
I interviewed an asylum caseworker, a whistleblower, and she said they all play this trick where they claim they were born on the 1st of January, right?
Yeah.
So he was gaming the
He
system
was
already.
yeah, so we don't actually know his real age, his birth date. Again, he refused to cooperate, refused a bone identity. He just lied all the way through. But his age, no, I don't think what would he be now? 28? We just don't know.
It's very hard. There is CCTV. I know you've seen some of it. Must be absolutely horrifying for you to watch it. But after he had pursued Rhiannon to the train station, obviously inflicted 23 wounds on her with a screwdriver, including piercing her brainstem. There's footage of him shortly after dancing and laughing, isn't there, outside the hotel? Siobhan, you've had a lot of time to think about this. What sort of person is it who can inflict that kind of barbarous I can't even have the word.
He's definitely a psychopath. He was
Yeah.
deemed sane, he's been deemed fit, but he's definitely a psychopath, and I will stand by what I say. I really think he has done this before.
Right.
Because he knew where to aim for. I mean, he'd gone for her breast, which is clearly a heart, her arm and a neck, and the head trauma was the one that sadly took her life. But even at the hospital, I said, he's done this before. He's got to have, because how do you commit a crime like that in 90 seconds?
Mm.
And this is my worry.
Just to say, she's not just a statistic. She's your daughter. She's your grandson's wonderful mum. And just tell us now, what was she like as a person? Because I hear
Oh,
fantastic.
she was lovely. I mean, I know people say, oh, you will say that she's your daughter, but the police said they spoke to so many people and they all got the same kind of thing back about her. She was just so kind-hearted.
Yeah.
Very family orientated. She had a little group of friends, been friends since they were little, nursery. And they're still, I mean, sadly, one of those friends heard Rhiannon's screams, but
Yeah.
she valued her friends, she valued her child, she valued her family. That was all she was. She didn't like to argue, she'd rather just walk away. She was very soft, but she was so loving.
She got this job in this hotel run by Serco, an asylum hotel. Did you or any of the family, I know she's got sisters as well and a brother.
She's got a brother as well, yeah.
But did you or any of the family think, hang on, she's surrounded by these young undocumented migrants? Did you have any concerns about her security?
Yeah, I mean, we were worried. Of course you are. It's just normal, but it was what she wanted. And I think, honestly, if she'd have felt scared at any time, she'd have just left. But no, yeah, we had our worries, obviously, like what kind of family would it be if we didn't? But Rhiannon didn't give us any reason at all to worry.
And she quite enjoyed
from the Saturday night before the Sunday. That was the only time Rhiannon ever mentioned anything.
And there was a small argument, but it was unrelated to the...
Very unrelated. See, a lot of this has gone on the media. She was killed over biscuits, etc. No, she wasn't. Totally separate incident. One of the migrants was drunk. There was something about broken biscuits, and he shouted at Rhiannon. When he got pulled up by, I don't know who by, but he apologised to Rhiannon. But Rhiannon obviously phoned her sisters, a bit worried. She didn't feel threatened, she just felt worried. So that was a totally different thing. But before that, no, she never gave us any reason to think get her out.
So can we go back to the night of the 20th of October, 2024? Rhiannon's walking to the train station. She's on the phone to her friend Emma when she is subject to this absolutely horrible, frenzied attack by this monstrous individual. Siobhan, when did you first know that Rhiannon had been attacked, and how quickly did you realise how serious it was?
Literally within minutes of Rhiannon's phone going off. Her friend Emma rang me, but I missed the call because I was pottering around doing something. Emma phoned Rhiannon's younger sister Cara. I've heard screams, Rhiannon's phone's gone dead, etc. Then literally within seconds, Cara rang me. And then I'm on the phone to Emma, Cara. And then you just think she's been attacked or maybe her phone's gone dead. Well, anyway, they're on the Emma's husband's on the phone to the police. Me and Cara jump off the phone, contacted Rhiannon's siblings, her sisters and her brother. I was, we're phoning the police. I phoned the hotel. Look, is Rhiannon there? No, she's gone. Well, you need to get someone over to that hotel because something's happened. We honestly believed, well, I honestly believed it was just she's just been beaten up. And then, like I said, it was a group chat with her siblings, and then it was the police. Then it was like we were phoning around all the hospitals because I lived in Walsall at the time. I thought she'd been beaten up, she'll go to the manor. Rang the manor, nothing. Well, then in between the calls, I got a phone call off the police to say we're with Rhiannon and she's going to the Queen Elizabeth. It's life-threatening or life-changing. And then shall we come and get you? I said, no, I've got someone coming out. It was my daughter, Alex. And then literally all the way, well, it wasn't even that far to the hospital, but to the hospital, you just kept thinking, she'll be all right, she'll be all right. And then obviously we got there and she wasn't.
Was she on a ventilator by that point, or was she?
No.
Was she? No.
As we walked in, she was in resus. And Alex looked through the little gap and she said, oh, she's all right, Mum. She's just lying there. Because you think if it's so bad, she'll be, intubated. And she goes, oh, Mum, she's just lying there with the doctors around her. She'll be all right. None of us gave up hope,
No.
And then the doctors came in, the consultants came in and they explained that she'd been stabbed. I can't, honestly, I just still can't comprehend it, and I remember saying, what do you mean she's been stabbed? She's been stabbed, and the main stab wound basically was to the head. So I said, well, is she sedated? They said no. So basically knocked her unconscious and that was it.
So could you see that when you first saw her that she'd been stabbed, or was it hard to tell what had happened?
No, when we went in, obviously you think stab knife. When myself and Alex went in to the resus, I said to Alex, I need a hand. So Alex took Rhiannon's hand out from under the blanket. And I focused on her arm and her face. And I said, why does it look like bitty? And she goes, oh, Mum, she's probably fell on the tarmac, when she's been attacked. Because even then, I still didn't believe Rhiannon wasn't going to come home. And she said, oh, and I said, it looks like a screwdriver. No, don't be silly, Mum, blah, blah. Well, we didn't know what caused it. We knew how she'd passed, but we didn't know how she was in hospital, etc. So that by this time we went out, no, the consultant, said, we're going to take Rhiannon up to ICU. Go and call the family. So we went out. I couldn't physically speak. So Alex phoned her siblings and said, look, you need to come up. Rhiannon's been attacked. They've told us 6 hours because they do 6 hours, 12 hours, etc.
They said she'd probably live for 6 hours, did they?
They gave us 6 hours at the beginning, yeah. We did contact the rest of the family somewhere, but I can't remember. And then we went up from resus, we went up to ICU, but she crashed in between. So by the time we got to ICU, she was then intubated on sport machines, etc. So it was like looking at 4 different Rhiannons, the one that left the door. I can't, it's just, yeah. No. And then, so we all still held out hope, and then her siblings came, and then like that larger family came. And I believed she was going to live. And I kept saying to my sister, look at her arm, look at her arm. And she had cuts on her face, but there was one just on her forehead. And I have to keep wiping it. And I said, it's a screwdriver. My sister said, stop fixating.
You were right. So she was I'll get upset saying this, but she was strong, wasn't she? Because she lived for 3 days and you were able to have that time with her. What was that like? Were you all talking to her?
We were all talking to her. We hope she can hear us. My son come in, and he doesn't deal with things like this very well. And you know, he was kind of like, "Oh, is she okay?" She kind of jumped. And we were like, "Oh, yeah, we don't know. We don't know if she's going to be okay." We all still held out hope, kind of thing. But um, I know she squeezed mine and my brother's hand. But all I remember saying to the consultant is, I've got this major sort of brain block. I can't remember a lot of things. But I remember saying to the consultant, can you let her live past Tuesday? Because it's Rhiannon's younger sister's birthday. But obviously, you can't guarantee. But she lived till Wednesday, yeah.
When did you first find out that it had been done by this illegal migrant was the murderer or the alleged murderer at that point?
He was arrested 5 hours after the crime. And I'm thankful it was British Transport, to be honest, because obviously we had police in the ward, etc. And she said, we've made an arrest. I said, was he from the hotel? Because I don't know. Obviously, they can't say too much, can they? I said, I think he was. And she just kept saying, oh, I really don't know. I said, no, I think he was. The next early hours of the morning, Monday morning, liaison officers came in. And I said, was he from the hotel? And they said, yeah.
And did they say, Siobhan, you've said that somebody at some point said, we don't want another Southport. Did you feel there was any sense in which the nature of the crime was, that they would rather it was not publicised?
I think what it was is when we were told the Tuesday not to leave.
This is her bedside. Yeah.
Not to leave the hospital yet. They'd done their tests, etc. So we rang family. But literally it was just myself and Rhiannon's sisters and her best friend at her bedside. I asked everybody not to. I just wanted it a personal thing. My son couldn't do it. It was too much. He was at home with his partner and their children. But I remember phoning the police saying, we've got to turn Rhiannon's life support off in a couple of hours. She couldn't be an organ donor because she was evidence, which really infuriated me because that's all she wanted was to be an organ donor.
Mm.
So when they said to me, she's evidence, no, she's not evidence, she's Rhiannon. But obviously, I couldn't accept what was happening. But I remember saying, please don't take her eyes because she has the most beautiful piercing blue eyes. They must have thought I was crazy because that's all I could focus on. But anyway, I remember phoning the police saying, look, we have to turn her life support off in a couple of hours. Well, in that time, they had obviously got the migrants out of the hotel. Well, that was the last thing on my mind.
Sorry, they were moving the migrants because you think they thought there might be
There was going to be another Southport, yeah.
Going to be another Southport, yeah, rioting.
I remember talking to the police. Now, I will never put down the police because British Transport have been a godsend to us. Even now, they're still, very much supporting us, etc. And they got the arrest. They've stood by us every step of the way, court, outside of court, etc. But sometime, I can't exactly remember when, they said, about talking. I said, listen, I'm not interested in talking to media, etc. for it to go out of context because I want justice for Rhiannon.
Mhm.
And then somewhere along the line, it was mentioned about the Southport, getting them out of the hotels. We didn't really, they'd gone by then. We didn't want another Southport. And I really don't mean it when I say this, but I didn't care at the time. I mean, God forbid, my heart breaks for the children of Southport and their families and whoever else. But my priority was Rhiannon and my children and my family.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, whatever kind of thing. But obviously, as I've kind of gathered a bit more, I think I understand why they said it, because Rhiannon would not condone violence. She was the least violent person you could ever meet. She didn't even like to argue. But at the same time, once I've said I'm not going to talk about it, I mean, Reed are at our doors, they're at my door, my sister's doors, my brothers, my daughters. And once I've said I'm not talking for Rhiannon, I'm not talking. That's it. I didn't want nothing to jeopardise her case. So I appreciate what they were saying, but it's the last thing I wanted to hear.
But since then, you've had time to think, and have you got angrier? Because it's clear that this individual, many of us would think, most of us, I think, most British people would think, she shouldn't be dead, should she? She's only dead because this
Because of him.
totally a man from a culture wildly different in its attitudes to women and girls was allowed to be in Walsall preying on your lovely daughter, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Rhiannon didn't know him. He clearly didn't know Rhiannon. As you see, I mean, we watched the full footage. It was a lot longer than court, obviously, but here, you know, a couple of migrants tried to approach him and he just shrugged them off, didn't speak, not a word. But he watched Rhiannon and the girls. You know, Rhiannon and you know, gone out for a vape, and as they walked in and he walked out. But everywhere they were, or Rhiannon was, he was not far away. This is what I can't. You know, she'd walk into reception, he'd follow into reception. She'd go back into the dining area and he'd go back and sit on his chair. She went out for a vape and he was kind of watching them. You know, he hung around the reception area and as they walked in, he walked out. But it must have been 10 foot wide, even longer, the entrance. But he deliberately walked into Rhiannon and shoulder barged her.
I know that Alex, as your another daughter, has been very passionate and outspoken about Rhiannon's case, and
Yeah.
but when you had to break the news to Rhiannon's little boy, who was then 5, now 6, she said Mummy had a poorly brain and the doctors couldn't fix it, so she had to go to heaven. I mean, you know, I've had children, and you know, I love children. What on earth was it like trying to explain to him what had happened to Mummy?
It was heartbreaking because he knew he'd been at the hospital, but he didn't know why. You know, obviously we had to tell him he couldn't lie, but it. I think the worst thing, apart from Rhiannon dying, was actually telling that child. You know, if we can't comprehend it and we were there every step of the way, how can a child of 5? You know, he just the cry that came from that child's mouth is something I will never forget. It's Alex was just broken, I was broken, and we're trying to compose ourselves to tell this little one, and he was just heartbroken.
Yeah, yeah.
What it was, he kept saying, you know, Alex said to him about the poorly brain. He says, "Oh, I need my vitamins. I don't want to get a poorly brain." So Alex said, "Look, it's not vitamins, because you know what children are like. It'll constantly be thinking." It's because it was a bad man, you know, and you know, but she couldn't be saved. So we're having to sit in bed with him all night and, you know, talk about her and talk about him and everything else. And how I don't know how that people don't see this side of it. They don't see behind the scenes of the pain. Of course, I mean, my grandsons and my granddaughters, they're all just heartbroken. You know, my eldest grandson was 17 at the time, and he was at the hospital every step of the way. And, you know, he just even couldn't speak, you know, because he went to see Rhiannon. We went and let him see her on his own, but one of my daughters, don't know if it was his mom or my other daughter, waited outside. And she went in to check on him. She was like, you know, "Are you okay?" And he was broken-hearted. But Rhiannon had a tear that came out of her eye. And then after that, she declined. So it was like she said goodbye to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, not long prior to this, Rhiannon had been out, good money, etc. Bought him motorbike, leathers, boots to keep him safe. So all he kept saying was, "I couldn't keep her safe, but she's tried to keep me safe."
Yeah.
So from a 17-year-old down to the youngest, who's now 3, they're constantly like, why?
It's impossible to explain, but is it right that her little boy said he'd like to be a brain
Brain
doctor
doctor, yeah.
when he grows up so he can
Yeah.
fix people like mummy? Honestly,
Yeah.
Siobhan, it's absolutely heartbreaking, but he's very lucky he's got you and Alex and his aunties and uncle. What would you like to say to Sir Keir Starmer and indeed to Jess Phillips, who is women's minister? Have you had any contact from people in government about Rhiannon's murder?
I'd been at the police station the day before with the police. I'd had to do something regarding Rhiannon. The day after, Alex, Cara and Emma drove up to Birmingham to meet Jess Phillips. Now, I forgot about this till the girls told me. She met my girls for half an hour, Alison, half an hour, promised femicide, promised to, do everything in Rhiannon's name. Not a single thing since. Alex reached out to her twice after, nothing. Our local MP, Matt Weston, reached out to him, nothing. But he emailed my niece, rabbiting crap about a bench. Well, the bench is irrelevant,
A bench in memory of Rhiannon. I saw
Yeah.
Matt Weston, he posted something online, in social media. He did post something, didn't he? But he hasn't been in touch with you.
Yeah, no. But now that I've started to speak out, I suddenly get an email off him.
Yeah.
I don't want it. I've just ignored it. I don't want any communication with the guy at all. Because yes, she was from here, Leamington Spa, and she moved up to Walsall to be with me. But even as an MP, he should have said, this girl is one of our own. We'll reach out to this family, etc. Not a single thing. And Jess Phillips, I never want to come into contact with her. Never. Because she really won't like what I have to say.
Do you think, again, because of the circumstances, because it's an illegal migrant, because it's such a explosive issue potentially, that Rhiannon is seen not as someone, and you, not as worthy of compassion and attention and support, but as a potential embarrassment to them as these thousands of men
Maybe.
continue to arrive?
Yeah, maybe it is. But then shouldn't this be the turning point where they say, listen, this is happening to us? I mean, I know I'm focused on Rhiannon, obviously, and these poor girls. I never watched the news or listened to the radio prior to this because it made me too sad. And I used to say to Rhiannon and my children, I'm not, I can't imagine going through that. And even now, I still won't. But obviously, things pop up, And then when to hear about Lily, Katie, Wayne, Stephanie. I mean, Stephanie lived a few doors away from my brother.
These are all Lily. These are all
with
young
children.
other women who've been murdered.
Wayne, a random attack, walking a dog. Lily's now left a child behind as well at 19. And this is, this is part of the reason we set up the foundation. But this wouldn't have happened to any of these poor girls, all the rapes, all the assaults, men included, because men are being attacked physically and sexually. This wouldn't happen if Sadiq Khan, Starmer, etc. said, listen, we'll turn this now. It's gone too far. No, they don't care.
You've got the Conservatives now, and you've got Reform. You've got Suella Braverman, who was in government, and she was trying to get this stopped, and they're now saying they've got to leave this ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, which basically gives the murderer of Rhiannon more rights to be safe. He's not allowed to be returned to his unsafe country, so he can come to Walsall to be unsafe to your lovely daughter. Is that correct?
Yeah.
How does that feel? Does it make you angry?
It makes me mad, to be fair, because they're on about the Rwanda, sending them so many to Rwanda.
Yeah.
Well, a small minority of these migrants going to Rwanda is still not going to change our country, is it?
No. What would you, if you were in a room with Keir Starmer? I don't rate his chances, frankly, Siobhan, having spoken to you, but what would you?
He really wouldn't like me at the end of it, because he would be told some home truths. What they're going to do? Arrest me for free speech, which is this country is about. But the minute, like Lucy Conley, etc., you put up a tweet, you make a comment, they arrest you. But
Yeah.
you've got thousands upon thousands of migrants walking walking around the streets, the country, etc., attacking our children, but they'd rather put us away rather than
It's
saying,
not
okay, let's listen. But if I was face to face with him, I would definitely tell him how I feel.
Rhiannon was very kind. Everybody says she was very soft, compassionate, funny person. Now, just to be clear, you're not saying there aren't any legitimate asylum seekers. You're talking about undocumented,
Unvetted, undocumented.
unvetted.
Not the genuine asylum seekers at all. You know, if Rhiannon used to speak to maybe a group of 5, and she didn't speak very much because obviously confidential, but she would say to me, "Oh, Mum, this guy's come over because he's trying to, get into the country and bring his family over, and or this person was gay, so he's had to run, fear of his life and fear of his family's life, etc." Now, my heart used to break for these people because I think, well, it's not fair in this day and age. Obviously different cultures, different countries, but people should be entitled to be gay, allowed to be gay. People should be allowed to want to bring their families to a safe country. What I'm saying and what I will stand by is genuine asylum seekers who have got their papers, they come here with their families or ready to bring their families over, not a problem. We come from a big Irish family as immigrants.
Mm, mm,
I
yes.
understand, I really do. It's the unvetted, because these are the ones causing the problems, Alison. The ones that are unvetted, undocumented. What are they? I know. We'll put you into barracks, or we'll put you somewhere else, and then we'll just let you walk free.
I want to read something to you actually because I found it very moving. Detective Chief Inspector Paul Atwell of British Transport Police spoke about you as a family after the court hearing, and he said nobody can really understand what they've been through to sit through that court case with the graphic evidence about Rhiannon. The level of respect I have for them as people is the highest echelon you can reach. So you've done her proud, haven't you? Do you feel that? I mean, do you have bad moments, and do you have good days and bad days? Do you get very upset
Yeah,
still?
yeah, I do. I still, like yesterday, I was very, very sad. I was at my sister's. But for Paul Atwell, British Transport, our liaison officers, Tim and Carl, I can't thank them enough. They have been brilliant. I mean, yes, don't get me wrong, I would have loved to have jumped there and got him in that courtroom, but my daughter is more important than that scumbag standing in that witness box. So
Yeah.
we did stay. I mean, there's a lot of us. There was a lot of us there. We remained dignified and quiet for Rhiannon.
You did say though, didn't you, when he was sentenced, did you not say something like, "You won't be dancing now"? You actually did.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
we've done a statement and obviously been printed out, but because the case was adjourned, you forget what you've written, etc. But I kept saying, "I'm going to say this, I'm going to say this." And my sister said, "Well, just say it." The judge, oh bless him, he was so lovely. But I remember reading the statement out and I'm shaking, but I'm angry and I'm sad and I felt all emotions. And I remember just looking at him thinking, do I say it? Am I going to get in trouble, etc.? And I just said, "Well, let me see you dancing now." And I just walked away.
Mm.
And then afterwards, everybody says, "I'm glad you said it because you're not going to be dancing now."
Finally, I want to come back to this lovely little boy, Rhiannon's son. You said that he's got her piercing blue eyes, like Mummy's beautiful eyes, and the same smile and laugh. What do you what do you want how do you want to bring him up now? I mean, do you want, the love you clearly feel for Rhiannon? I mean, do you think that lives on in him now? She lives in him.
That will continue. I mean, like I said, I have grandchildren. They're all very close. Siblings are very close. As a big, wider family, we're all very close. But obviously, I've got a little soft spot for him. But it breaks my heart because one minute he'll talk about her, then he won't. Understandable, he's a child. But it's all good memories, which is good. But he is like looking at Rhiannon as a child, and it breaks my heart.
This is a really wonderful initiative you've set up now with Orla Minahan of the Pink Ladies, who put together the Rhiannon White Foundation. We're going to put the link to that in the show notes to Planet Normal What are you hoping to achieve with the foundation in Rhiannon's memory?
First and foremost, legacy in her name. Secondly, to help families, children in the situation we are now. I mean, like it all explained, there is charities out there for rape victims, domestic violence victims, etc. But where is there actually a charity for children and families of murdered mothers? And when I met Orla, such a lovely, lovely lady, she asked me what I wanted, and I said, do something in Rhiannon's name, do a charity in Rhiannon's name to help families like ours. This is where we've come back to the foundation, yeah.
Well, Siobhan, thank you very much. I just say 3 words to you: stop the boats.
Exactly, I agree. Stop them. Yeah.
Stop the boats. Siobhan, it's been a great privilege to talk to you, and let's hope that this amazing charity in your daughter's memory just does justice to the wonderful person she was.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Well, Alison, I have to say, I thought that was a very powerful interview. And I think, we're getting up to 300 episodes of Planet Normal now. And if we've achieved anything over recent years with our podcasts, as well as hopefully making people laugh from time to time, I think we've also given a voice to people who deserve to have a voice on a national platform linked to a national newspaper. And if anyone deserves a voice in our country at the moment, it's Siobhan White. And crikey, what must she be going through, burying her own child in such horrific circumstances? Well done you for talking to her, and well done Siobhan for speaking out in such a dignified way. It must have been very painful for her.
Absolutely, but I think that it does tap into this wider issue, Liam, of what was that murderer doing here, right? He had no place in our country. A sane country wouldn't let in someone who has already been rejected for asylum by 2 other European countries. And I absolutely believe that Rhiannon would be alive and with her little boy today if our immigration system was working properly. And if listeners would like to contribute or to mark Rhiannon's memory, there is the Rhiannon White Foundation, which is set up to help orphaned children or whose mothers have been murdered, and that you can find the link to that in the show notes. And I should also say, I mentioned last week, and hoping that Siobhan and other bereaved mothers, we, with a group of women, are planning a Women on the Beach protest, which will be happening on the weekend of June the 13th. And we will be facing the Channel, hopefully hundreds and hundreds of women and girls to show what we think of the undocumented males who are trying to break in to the United Kingdom and putting people like Rhiannon at unacceptable risk.
Now on to our listener emails. The messages you send us at planetnormal@telegraph.co.uk. Please keep them coming. We learn so much from you, the citizens of Planet Normal.
Well, Liam, we had a lot of reaction this week from listeners about your great interview with Sophie Winkleman, who, of course, is campaigning against screens and their baleful effect on young children. And this is from Evan, who is from my part of the world. Dear Alison and Liam, my family and I will always be so grateful to you for the light of reason you both kept burning during the darkness of the COVID hysteria, showing us all that we weren't alone and somehow finding things to laugh about too. That's just me laughing at co-pilot Halligan, isn't it, mainly? But anyway, thank you for the passionate and insightful interview with Sophie Winkleman. I agree that smartphones in schools are a terrible idea and that all content is harmful to education and attention spans. Yes, even cat videos. But I think there is another, even more damaging aspect of this story that we need to confront urgently, says Evan. I have a leadership role in a national charity in your beloved Wales, Alison. As part of my job, I travel around and meet a lot of primary and secondary teachers. I usually ask them about the young people in their care, and a pattern is emerging. They tell me that about a third of each year group have an official diagnosis of some kind of neurological or behavioral issue, and that a further third would probably get one if the waiting list weren't so long. Only a third of kids are what is now termed neurotypical, making the phrase oxymoronic. It is no longer typical to be neurotypical. This is astonishing, Liam. This is kids with diagnoses of anxiety or Asperger's, absolutely off the charts. Anyway, Evan continues. Teachers tell me that the focus of their jobs has changed from teaching to crowd control, but this isn't currently reflected in any official data. So that means nobody's asking what is causing this huge generational time bomb. It seems the culprit could be smartphones and tablets again, being given to children before they can even speak. Prams and buggies have special attachments now so that babies and toddlers can be distracted by these devices. I find it tragic to see families at restaurants giving young children a smartphone so the adults can ignore them. I can't remember the last time I saw a child reading a book in public, but I have seen toddlers behaving with the rage of an addict when the device is taken away. Of course, we should have sympathy, says Evan. It's difficult being a parent, but we've got to raise awareness that giving these devices to babies and toddlers is causing irreparable harm. By the time they're old enough to go to school, children should be able to sit calmly together and enjoy learning, playing, and making. Their attention spans all too often make this impossible now. It's during the first 5 years that the brain is at its most neuroplastic, hardwiring it for life. If it were up to me, says Evan, society would regard a baby or toddler with a smartphone with the same revulsion and stigma as one holding a cigarette. I believe that many people instinctively know this to be true, so I'm baffled that so few people seem to be worrying about it. I will keep doing what I can in my own charitable work in Wales. And he signs off, Diolch o galon unwaith eto. Well, there we are. Thank you again for everything you are doing for us and future generations. Diolch I ti, Evan. Thank you.
This is from Tim. My wife and I are avid readers of Alison's column and found her recent article on NHS waiting lists not only interesting, but very disturbing. A problem I think that's often overlooked is that some GPs seem to be avoiding diagnosis. My wife and I have both been denied diagnosis. In my case, having had a history of prostate cancer in my family, my father and grandfather both had it, my GP kept refusing to give me a PSA test, saying they were not reliable. Exasperated, in 2019, I ticked the relevant box on a blood test form while the nurse's back was turned during my annual checkup. The PSE reading came back raised, and my GP called me in saying he couldn't remember asking for it, and I confessed my sin of ticking that box. He was dismissive and said it could be false, but on my request we did a retest 6 weeks later, which was even higher. I'm still here following radiotherapy for cancer, but I dread to think what may have happened if I hadn't insisted. In my wife's case in February 2023, writes Tim, whilst on holiday in Tenerife, she began to have terrible pain in her hip, groin area and leg. She again consulted our GP, who had first sent her for physio, which didn't work, and over the next 2.5 years was basically prescribed larger doses of painkillers. She was told, following an x-ray, that her hip was fine. Fast forward to November 2025, we paid for a private MRI scan and were told that her hip was arthritic and needed replacement. We then requested all my wife's notes from the GP, and surprised, the x-ray had revealed an arthritic hip, but nothing had been done. So either GP can't read or deliberately did not diagnose her problem and put her on a waiting list. Regards, Tim. A very disturbing email there from Tim, but clearly very well evidenced in his own experiences and those of his wife.
Honestly, Liam, we've had so many of these, absolutely, scores of them, and all telling a very similar story. The government is insisting that the hospital waiting lists are going down, and what listeners are revealing to us is smoke and mirrors, ways of keeping them off the list, ways of cancelling appointments, sending elderly people emails saying, are you sure you still want to be on the list, which they could miss, and so on. And this is Rosemary. I mean, there are loads and loads of them, but I just want to read Rosemary also talking about this NHS issue. I love Planet Normal and I always listen, says Rosemary. I found the email from Dr. Claire upsetting as it was so pertinent to my own experience. I'm currently almost 3 weeks post-op following abdominal surgery, having waited 10 months on an urgent waiting list for an Essex hospital. I feel a major problem with the NHS is the haphazard communication, both within the system and with the public patients. After waiting 6 weeks for an ultrasound scan, says Rosemary, I was eventually referred and seen by a consultant in March 2025. I was then put on the urgent waiting list and warned that the wait would be months. How I wish I'd gone private at that point. On returning home from that appointment, I had a phone call inviting me in for an operation. You're going to love this, Halligan. Luckily, says Rosemary, I have some medical knowledge and realised that they had contacted the wrong patient for the wrong operation.
Oh my God.
Lucky escape, she says. As time went on, I became anxious that I could be developing cancer and was very hard to find out what was happening. Was I still on the waiting list? A phone number I was given did not accept incoming calls. An email address just pinged back. As Dr. Claire told Planet Normal, if you're lucky enough to speak to a person, they don't know anything. And this is usually after leaving a message and waiting for them to deign to reply. And Rosemary goes on, in October, I was offered a date for surgery at 2 days' notice. She said, I made arrangements only for it to be cancelled 2 hours later. I found this extremely upsetting. And after Christmas, Rosemary says, in desperation, I contacted PALS. Now, PALS is the patient liaison service. And then, in short, a miracle occurred. I had the operation 2 weeks later. I think this only happened thanks to the intervention of PALS. And I should just say to any Planet Normal listeners, if you find yourself in this situation, get in contact with the patient liaison thing, or email your Auntie Alison and she'll give the hospital a bit of a kick in the shins. What do you say, Halligan? Anyway, Rosemary says that she's been discharged. How do people manage who are not assertive, cannot advocate for themselves, cannot use the internet? Presumably they die, go private, or get validated off the waiting list. But anyway, she says, now, such a relief. I'm clear and I can now put 2025 behind me and start living again. Thank you, Alison and Liam, for Planet Normal and for all that you are doing. You always hit the nail on the head, says Rosemary. And maybe one day I will understand more about economics. Oh, yes. Even
When
the most
when the camera's off, Alison always hits me on the head. Just saying. It's abuse, I tell you, abuse.
Even the most unpromising students, Rosemary, can pick up a few bits and pieces about the bond markets, whatever that is.
Martin says, I just listened to Planet Normal and your comments on Starmer's multiple sorries over the past few days and weeks. Whenever I hear such apologies, writes Martin, I revert to the words of Richard Millett, KC, lead counsel to the Grenfell inquiry, in his summing up. The Grenfell inquiry, of course, was the inquiry into that ghastly tower block fire in North London in 2017. So Richard Millett, KC, lead counsel to the Grenfell inquiry, in his summing up, referring to the government's response where sorry is repeated 18 times, Richard Millett said, true regret is not the repeated and mournful use of the word sorry, but the achievement of a practical outcome reflecting permanent self-corrective action. I wonder, writes Martin, if Sir Keir has ever considered his learned friend's powerful words. Best wishes, Martin.
Excellent.
And shall we just finish with John?
Yes.
Hello, chums. My wife and I never miss an episode of your brilliant podcast. Do please keep up the great work in holding our glorious leaders to account. Speaking of whom, Sir Keir's recent problems prompted me to compose a limerick. I hope you like it. Said Starmer, we need the right man to grease up that Chagos scam plan. McSqueenie, cried Mandy, might come in quite handy. And that's when the trouble began. And on that bombshell, that's it from Planet Normal as we leave our sanctuary of sweet reason. For another week, our flying refuge of reasoned views. Email of the week. It's my turn, and it's Rosemary. Rosemary, fantastic email. So send us an email to planetnormal@telegraph.co.uk. Put your address, your postal address in that email, and put the subject heading mug winner, and we will send you that rare as rocking horse poo Planet Normal mug.
And a final reminder about our fantastic event next Tuesday, the 24th of February at the Emmanuel.
Oh, I'm busy.
Centre in London. Halligan already dreading the exciting prospect of 3 very shy retiring women with him on the stage. Me, Lionel Shriver, she's a shrinking violet, and the first interview Lionel will give about her brilliant new novel, Better Life, and also Suella Braverman, her first public account of becoming Reform's newest MP and putative education secretary. Now, details of how to buy tickets still available can be found in the link in the description to this episode, and also at telegraph.co.uk/Planet Normal. I know some people, it's a lot of money, so I'm just going to offer now, just off the top of my head, a couple of young people would like to write in marking it for me and Liam. Then I'm sure we can, Cass, our producer, very kind lady from Hull, can find 2 tickets, free tickets to that event down the back of a sofa. So just mark that if you're under 25 or if you're unwaged and you'd like to come, just write in. And everyone else, please buy a ticket and come, because it's going to be great.
And you might even get to meet the co-pilot and see what I have to put up with when the camera's turned off and the mic isn't working. And on that, if you've enjoyed this episode of Planet Normal, do subscribe, leave a review and rating wherever you listen to us. Thanks finally to Cass Ho, to James Hodgson, Louisa Wells, and our whole production team. Stay safe and in touch with us and with each other. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
If you're enjoying our journalism, why not sign up to From the Editor, our free email newsletter? Start your day with the latest news and opinion, plus our bite-sized puzzles. Scan the QR code to sign up free today.